Hello everyone. Welcome to this NBS webinar on NBS Chorus for small practices, looking at the NBS Chorus Small Works package, designed for architects, engineers and designers who write specifications for small-scale works and less technically complex projects. Some simple housekeeping at the beginning here. Today's webinar contains a demonstration of NBS Chorus with the Small Works content and a conversation with one of our Small Works customers. For the smooth running of the webinar, your microphones will be muted. You'll still be able to ask questions, but please use the questions box, which should be to the side of your screen, and all of those comments will be recorded and answered as part of the follow-up after the webinar ends. My name is Paul, I'm Head of Technical Solutions here at NBS, and today we'll also hear from Peter Wray, an architect based in Wales, who'll tell us how he uses NBS Chorus at his small practice on projects like new builds, extensions, renovations and conservation work at that small works scale of project. So let's start by looking at NBS Chorus and what the small works package is designed to do. So alongside many practices and companies of various sizes that use NBS Chorus, in the last couple of years we've developed a dedicated package providing all the benefits of using NBS content and the efficiency of online specification, but with a content set designed for smaller projects. The last few years have been uncertain times for smaller practices, with many heavily impacted by the pandemic, so NBS wanted to offer a cloud-based solution to practices working on smaller works, especially with many small practices choosing to continue to work remotely and demonstrate the power of collaborating online. Using NBS Chorus will increase your efficiency, and existing customers have told us that it can be up to 70% faster to produce a specification once you're up and running than producing that same document manually. This can help free up more time for design and consultation, increase your competitiveness, and especially give you the opportunity to safely reuse content from previous projects and retain lessons learned in the clauses you develop, reducing your risk through robust specification and reference to standards, and connecting to model information where that's relevant too. There are some excellent core features available to all users with any tier of NBS Chorus subscription, which I'll show you today, and then optional functionality through Chorus Pro licenses, which will add greater collaboration and information management to your workflow. It's also possible to view on the nbs.com a scope of works, which shows you the sections that are included within the Small Works library and demonstrates that there's a real range of those sections available, but the content has been tailored to suit the needs of small practice, so without all of the clauses that would appear in the full building section, they're tailored to really suit the needs of a smaller project. So let's consider some of the benefits and essential features of using NBS Chorus for small projects compared to other methods and also to previous NBS tools. Firstly, NBS Chorus is cloud-based. That means there's nothing to download and you're not tied to one machine. Chorus will run on any capable device using a web browser. So I'm using Chrome here, and that means you can use Apple Mac because NBS Chorus, through the web browser like Safari or Firefox, all you need is an internet connection. And that means there's no updates for you to install or for an external IT team to manage. And you know that you're using the latest version of the NBS Chorus platform every time that you log in. NBS Chorus is also project-based. We know this is how most people tend to think about their work as discrete projects with a location, a client, a budget, and project details. And you can embed that information into NBS Chorus and reference it, including this Google Maps API to provide access to a known location. You can also choose to have multiple specifications as part of a project, divided perhaps by sub-packages or specific parts of the work, or choose to generate just one specification document that describes all of the requirements for that particular project. If you work in an office with multiple people and you have sufficient seats, you can also collaborate together. One working on a PC, one on a MacBook working from home, one on a smartphone, tablet on site, and invite those users to be part of the projects and control the access that they have to individual specifications, managing multiple users and seeing their real-time changes when they're saved to the cloud. With higher levels of Chorus subscription, you can also collaborate with other organizations, sharing the specification with clients, subcontractors, and the wider project team or manufacturers. But that's a Chorus Pro subscription feature. But within your organization, you can choose to provide access and control permissions on the specifications that you create. So NBS Chorus is designed to provide access to all kinds of different content sets for various scales of projects, various classification structures and locations around the world. And if you subscribe to NBS Chorus for small works, you'll get access to a dedicated set of NBS content structured in the common arrangement of work sections. And also, for small works, NBS Chorus also provides a preliminary set tailored around concise, domestic, and minor works contracts, if that's of interest to you too. For small works, it tends to be that typically cause is well understood by the contractors and subcontractors receiving your specifications. So we'll add some content to our spec, and all we have to do that is to click this Add Content button here, and we get a search engine within NBS Chorus. And what I'll do initially is show you the full scope of all of the content in NBS Chorus Small Works, but then I'll also show you a couple of ways to search and filter the content as well. So you can see here, or through the scope of content that I showed you before, that there's over 100 minor works sections that have been included if you previously used NBS Building, and along with 28 work sections from the old intermediate library, including some of the domestic services level content that are commonly used or critical for small projects. But you'll also notice that in this view, we also see the other libraries of content too. And what you have is access to the small works library level. But if you did want to access a part of the content that doesn't appear in the small works library, you'll see that you'll get this pop-up, which is that your organization has not subscribed and that this content is from the level above the library that you have access to. And you can choose to add that content to your subscription if that's required. And you can also choose to add a template clause as well, and I'll show you that in a moment. But in order to see just the small works content, we can use this drop-down to filter the libraries that are shown and just show the small works content that's here. And I can also, currently these are sorted by code, and you can see all of the sections that are available within NBS Chorus for small works, but I can choose to sort these by relevance. And that means when I search for a term, say stone, I'm then able to see the sections where the term stone appears within those sections, so conserving and repairing masonry, natural rubble walling, and so on. And to add those to my job, it's as simple as just clicking on the plus button, and that'll add those sections to the content of my specification. Each one of those is a work section which contains a number of NBS clauses that have been pre-authored by our technical team and allow you to adapt and edit those depending on the projects that you're working on. And you could choose, if you wanted to work through each of those sections, and there's a number of different options for how you do that. So we'll come back to the editing and adaptation of the spec in a moment. But in terms of the actual content search, a couple of things that are worth knowing is that it's possible to use a shortcut, which is code, and to search for sections within a particular part of the classification. In this case, the H sections, if you already knew that that's where the content that you needed was, if you're familiar with cores. And again, to sort these by code, you would see all of the sections within the H group of cores, and that will work for any of the codes within the cores structure, so that you can use that as a bit of a checklist to make sure that you've added all of the sections that you require into your specification. If I remove that small works filter that we mentioned before and show all of the content for all of the libraries, you do have that option to add a template of the clauses that don't appear within the small works sections. So in this case, cast stone ashlar walling. And what you get is just a template to fill in yourself so that you can adapt and edit this clause and fill it in. But there's no guidance associated with that. It's just a template clause. Whereas with the SmallWorks content itself, you get all of the clause structure that you would expect, tailored to the type of small projects that we know that practices tend to be working on. So that's one approach, and that tends to be adding new content to a specification when you're starting out. And that's one approach. One thing that we see often in small practices is that you want to develop a set of specification clauses that you can reuse from project to project. So here's an example of that approach, where you could have a specification made of all of the sections that you're likely to need on a future project, allowing you to quickly pick and choose the content that you need for your job. So let's look at, for example, C51 here, conserving timber. And in this, you can see the depth and the content of the clauses that appear in here and the information that's there. So if you have used NBS Building or NBS Scheduler before, you can see that they often will reference off to guidance. They'll often reference to external information and external references. And you can be safe in the knowledge that those standards and the references are being updated and kept up to date by our technical teams, reducing the risk of things going wrong and giving you peace of mind that you're generating an accurate and up-to-date digital record of the decisions being made, helping create that golden thread of information that goes through. So those external references are hyperlinked, and they will open up in the NBS Publication Index, and you can see that they're the latest version of those documents. And if you have a subscription to the Construction Information Service, you can access and download those standards, or if not, you can choose to buy them from the vendor like BSI in this case here. Let's look back at our list of the content within our Office standards here, and go to natural slating, H62 is another example. And here you can see where you might start to build up a standard clause with a handful of clause items that you need to adapt. So in this case, perhaps most of it is standard content, but the roof pitch of the particular project that you're working on might change from project to project, or the color of the slates that are going to be used, or the sizes, or the headlap, and so on. And you could change and adapt those values as you require, but the majority can be built up as a standard set of clauses to then adapt. And you can see across all of this, you can then choose to park the clauses that aren't relevant, so that if certain items aren't required as part of the type of work that you do, you can choose to park those within the clause content. And then for things like execution instructions and how some of the actual workmanship is carried out, there are clauses for that too that tend to be at the base of those sections. So we can go into this content overview here with the sections that we've got, highlight the things that we need. So in this case, let's say it was C51 and H62, and we can choose to copy that across to our specification in our project. So I'm going to choose my project here, and then I choose the specification and I paste those across. So we're copying those standard clauses, and it pastes those into my specification here, where we previously added the two stone sections. So that's a common workflow for generic reusable content. But with a Chorus Pro subscription, you also have the ability to expand that method to masters, which is a feature allowing you to build up a library of these commonly used clauses and manage them into different folders and specifications and tailor those to your organization. So if you do tend to work on a variety of project types, masters may be something that you would look to consider rather than hosting all of those in one pool within a project within the Office standards themselves. As I mentioned, there's also a set of preliminaries referencing contracts like the JCT minor works, the RIBA concise and domestic building contracts, and including many of the aspects that NBS customers of all company sizes say that they benefit from in terms of, for example, in A31, an explanation of all of the terminology that gets used within the rest of the specification. So those clear definitions of what these terms actually mean provides you that reduction of risk and ensures that there's a really clear understanding of the content. So often the preliminaries need to be read in conjunction with the specification, and we've got those prelims tailored to suit the needs of small practices too. So in our project here, let's go to add another section to our specification, and in this case I'm going to search for fencing. And again, they're currently listed in code order and it shows all of them. So let's choose relevance and let's just choose the small works content. And when we search across for fencing, we'll then get Q40 here and we can add that to our job and click that on the left-hand side. And again, there may be sections within here that are not relevant to the particular project that you're working on. So let's say that chain link fencing wasn't required, but what we need is a wooden post and rail fencing. And within here, there's a number of drop-down values to help you make these decisions. Typical things that are going to be specified for a post and rail fence within a small type of project, and the kind of section references that you might expect for the finish and the exterior wood stain and so on for that particular thing. Different methods of execution and what the requirement is for how they're going to be set into the ground, and then accessories, for example, like a gate that might be required, and references to standards to show how they're going to conform. And you can quickly create that specification just by using the drop-down values in NBS. And as soon as you click save, it's saved to the cloud, and you don't have to worry about those changes. Everything's being saved as you're working through. And you can see who's been working on that clause and who's part of that. In terms of then being able to edit that content, you can choose to add your own rows beneath here, so new items can be added, and they can go down to a number of indents so that you can begin to have your own items within here. The ability to park rows, so if, for example, the maximum center wasn't relevant, you can choose to park the information there if there weren't any accessories and so on, to be able to really tailor this clause to what you need. And you'll notice on the right-hand side that it's synchronizing with guidance all the time. So even though this is a small work section, you're not getting access to the whole of NBS building, what you'll see is some really high-quality guidance about the different properties that are required here. Recently, we've added new features too in terms of things like being able to add a table to the specification. So when you click on here, you then get the option to add a table if there are multiple items that you need to consider into a small schedule within this clause, and that can be produced within the spec as well. And the ability to complete, once you've filled in the properties within here, to mark each of these sections as complete and to choose to work through a completion. So you can see here that 1 of 21 I've made a decision on, and there's still a number of clauses to make a choice of whether I choose to park these clauses, and they're not required as part of my project. And as we do that, this will update to show that a decision has been made against each of those sections, showing you a real development of the specification and how it's evolving as you're working. Another part of that development of Chorus Pro features, which will add different ways of managing information, if that's of interest, are our organization notes and spec notes. So you have the ability to, with an enhanced subscription to Chorus Pro, add specification notes that give you some place to put guidance, perhaps for other members of your team, or a record of the decisions and the audit trail of why you've chosen perhaps certain aspects within this clause, lessons learned from previous projects, that kind of thing, or client requirements that need to be considered as part of the spec. And for perhaps larger organizations, then the ability to have notes that don't just go with this individual specification, but span across the organization, so that every time somebody brings in the wooden post and rail fencing clause, there are organization notes and guidance, perhaps office policies, perhaps lessons learned from previous projects that you can add in and ensure that everybody within your organization knows the best practice way of approaching that particular specification. Also to mention that within the NBS Chorus for Small Works, you also get access to our manufacturer information. So via NBS Source, for something like this Gates clause, there are a number of product clauses available associated with that. And so there's access to that NBS Source manufacturer information, and you can choose to view that within the context of the clause that you're looking at. Alternatively, if you make a selection of the manufacturer that you're looking for here in this particular item, the ability to view just the content on the right-hand side there of the manufacturer that you've chosen. And then if you click on this link down here for NBS Source, that'll take you to the relevant page within the NBS Source platform, our manufacturer product information platform, where you can begin to really compare the various options that you have available for all of the content within NBS Source, and the ability to compare various items within there for their particular properties. So if your important criteria happen to be environmental performance, whether it's their structural strength, those properties will be comparable between those particular items. So I can click compare products here, and then you can see the various properties side by side to help you make decisions about what options are available for each of those. And then just by clicking on the add to spec button, that'll take you back to NBS Chorus and add that particular item to your specification. Finally, to show you that there are a number of options in terms of how the publication works within NBS Chorus. And for small works, you have the option to publish to PDF, a default PDF output, or to export to Microsoft Word, where you can then do more editing and the ability to change the styles and so on. We have the ability within advanced subscription levels of NBS Chorus to do more in terms of style sheets and to build up a library of those where you can adapt them to various project types or to the types of clients that you work with. But a default structure for the PDF exports quickly, and it's just like a download within a website. It'll appear in your downloads folder once that's published. So here's the default output from our specification that we've put together so far. So just with the sections that we've got and the ability to look at that and see the content in that kind of standard structure. But you can see that it's really clear, everything's into its own section, and the clauses are really nicely styled to make it very obvious where references need to be. Along with this, also on the website, you can choose to download a sample specification, and this is created by our technical authors using the SmallWorks content. We have sample specifications for all of our content sets, but there is one for the SmallWorks content, and that covers a few more sections there, so that you can begin to see the type of structure of some of the content within here. It doesn't go into huge detail for every single section, but gives you some context and some understanding of what is possible within the NBS Chorus platform. I'm delighted today to also share a customer story from Peter Wray of Wray Architects, a long-time user of NBS and now using NBS Chorus SmallWorks. Hello, Peter. Thanks again for joining us. So can you start by telling us about your practice and the type of work you do?
Yes, my practice is a one-man band in North Wales, and I've been practicing now for about 12 years in North Wales, and I've slowly built the business up. My work is predominantly residential, so new builds and extensions, but I also do a little bit of heritage work. So I've worked with churches, sort of restorations after fires or reordering of churches. Some small commercial works in art galleries, small shops, really anything that comes my way that's of the right sort of size.
How do you judge that size? Does it tend to be in terms of project potential budget cost, or is that how you tend to?
It's tended to work itself out, because I think the size of my practice attracts a certain kind and size of work. So there have been only one or two occasions where I felt the job is too large for me and sort of pointed them elsewhere. A lot of it's to do with insurance as well, but it just seems to be the sort of work that can be managed by one person tends to come my way. I haven't really had to be particularly selective.
Excellent. That's really good to hear. And in terms of the project roles that you take on those projects, does it tend to just be design stages or contract
No, I
administration?
offer the full service, including project contract administration. There are many times when I wish I didn't, but I do offer the full package. One of the reasons for that round here is that a lot of my work is geared around the tourist industry, so second homes, holiday lets, and often the client is absent. So I'm quite frequently, they really value having that person on the ground that they can do a video call with, or have photos and a site report from to just keep an eye on things. So
Understood.
I do have a few clients who are self-builders, and they only need my input up to the building reg stage, and then there's no contract. They manage the building themselves, and then I'll just offer an hourly rate for any advice they might need on site. But yes, the majority of jobs I do offer the traditional full service, from sort of working on the brief to final handover. Having said that, having decent software tools like Revit and the NBS means that I can be more confident that my output is accurate and correct, even if it's then translated to a paper format to pass the contractor. I do use AutoCAD for a very small amount of work, and then it's just the usual sort of open office tools.
And so in terms of, I guess, thinking about NBS Chorus, are there particular benefits that it's brought to you comparative to previous versions of NBS?
I was thinking about this, and although I don't tend to collaborate, one of the benefits is when I was using NBS Building, I did have problems, particularly around changing technology. So when I had to upgrade my computer, or I had computer problems, because the NBS Building was actually tied to the hardware, when the computer stopped working, I lost access to it. But the Chorus, it's a useful confidence to know that if my laptop breaks, I can go to PC World, an hour later I can be up and running again, and
Brilliant.
I don't have to reinstall or sort of get stuff off the old hard drive.
That the information's online.
That gives some sort of security. And if I ever did need to work on someone else's computer, if I was out at site and had access to a different computer, it's useful to know that I could log on and access things if necessary.
Fantastic. That's good. And I guess you mentioned that you tend not to collaborate directly on projects. That tends to be just because of the project scale. And
yes, it is. And on the slightly larger projects I've had, the consultants have tended to use their own proprietary formats and systems for what they do. So there hasn't really been that chance for any kind of collaborative working. It's been more a case of just including the consultant's output wholesale with my documents, rather than forming a sort of integrated package. And for the jobs that I've worked on, that's worked fine. And it also, actually, I suppose working that way gives a slight benefit, and it's quite clear who's liable for which drawings and which output, because you can see they're from different sources.
Understood. Yeah.
But yes, it's more just the scale of my projects. It makes it inappropriate to collaborate like that.
So would you be able to share a project with us and talk a bit about how you've approached specification writing?
Yes.
Super, thank you.
So this is my dashboard, and I do, as you can see, enjoy the ability to put a little icon on each project, which gives a really clear visual access to all the projects. It makes it I find it much easier than having a list with names. I can just glance at the images and find the projects.
Looks fantastic. Yeah.
If we look at this one, this is quite a small job. There was a small porch here, and it's just demolishing and rebuilding a porch, demolishing and rebuilding this sunroom and a small extension out the back. So it's effectively a small, about a 25 square meter single story extension plus a porch on the front. However, even if it's a very small project, there are all the same components involved as a large project. You have all the same, I mean, less of them, but still the same components going into the building.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I guess the scale doesn't necessarily change the complexity sometimes. There's
a sort of base limit to the complexity, I would say. So you've still got doors, you've still got windows, you've still got electrical fittings, you've still got heating, ventilation. It's just you've only got one of each of those rather than 20 or 100. But
same considerations.
Yes, and the same number of things to specify. What I tend to do is produce a specification following producing a building regulations drawing. So I'll do construction drawings, and then I'll draw up an NBS spec. That NBS spec, together with the construction drawings and the structural engineer's input, will form the bulk of the package that goes out to tender, together with a Excel spreadsheet for pricing.
Sure. Yeah. So, and I guess in terms of the clauses within NBS, how much of the content do you tend to adapt and need to adapt for the specifics of the project, comparative to, I guess, filling in aspects of the NBS generic clauses?
Okay. Well, I suppose if I go through the way I actually
that would be brilliant.
Set up a new project. What I've done is developed what I call my office standards. So the only one with a photo of our old house. So this Wray Architects one here, these are just ones when I moved over from NBS Building, I imported things, but actually I haven't used them. So I have my office specification, which has most of the sections from the NBS Small Works in here. Some of them are complete because on nearly all my projects they'll have the same thing. So if there is topsoil, then these clauses are absolutely fine. So as wherever possible, I fill these in for so they're applicable to nearly all my projects, and then some of them. So let me show you. Yeah, if we look at rainwater drainage systems, for example, I have a mixture of projects, some which will have aluminium gutters, some UPVC. So I've left this partially complete, and I have a specification for aluminium gutters, which I've put in as black. I've also got PVC gutters in, again, the most common profile that I would use, the most common color. What I will do then is I'll copy this whole specification into a new project and then go through, and for example, if I'm having UPVC gutters, I will simply park the aluminium clauses, the aluminium pipe work as well. And then I might edit the color to white if that's appropriate to the job. And then mark the clauses complete. That way, it means for a fairly standard project, it takes me about an hour to transfer the specification and go through and pick the bits that I might want. So it might have a flat roof, or it might have a pitched roof, and other choices like that. It takes about an hour to get the basic building specified, I suppose, all of the normal components. And then usually each project has one or two things which are a little bit out of the ordinary. For instance, somebody might want a glass balustrade on their stairs, which I wouldn't usually do, so I'd have to then put that in. But at least it narrows it all down to just one or two items that I then have to start trawling through the manufacturer's data or writing my own clauses for. So the bulk of a project will be the standard NBS clauses brought in for my office standards.
That's fantastic. It's really good to see that approach. I suppose, are you then using each project as a way of maintaining and building that library of those office standards? Or do you sorry, go on.
Yes, I do. If I do a project, so for example, let's take an EV charging point, which is something that's now become very suddenly a requirement on almost every project. If I put that into a project, what I'll do is I will copy that clause back into the office standards specification. I will then make it more generic. If there's a reference to drawings in there, I'll take those out and I'll mark it as incomplete. And then for every new project, that will automatically be in there and just needs to be tailored to the project, maybe with a drawing reference or a color or something like that. So that tends to be the way I keep the office standard a sort of live document.
That's brilliant. It's a great approach, and it means, I suppose, because especially if you're working in a similar vernacular and a similar kind of way, a lot of the standard clauses will be reusable and allow you to have common clauses, and then you are just parking and adapting the things that are necessary on a project by project basis. I
would say probably more than 90% of each project are techniques and construction types that I've used on many other projects, so they'll be there and ready in the office standards. So it makes it quite quick. Also, by adding these things back into the office standards, that gradually becomes more and more complete. So rather than each project starting from a blank sheet and adding in all the things I can think of, it tends to mean that things aren't forgotten.
Excellent.
I'm not going over old ground on each project thinking, oh, I better remember to specify wall ties, because that just comes almost as standard from the office spec. And then as sort of building regulations change or other standards change, I can then modify those or make the office standard appropriate to keep up to date with that.
That's superb. Yeah. How often, I suppose, are you having to research something from scratch? So you mentioned EV charging points, which presumably at a certain point, you were writing the first of those clauses.
Yeah,
how do you go about it?
I would say, as I said before, probably on an average project, there'd be one or two items which I've specified for the first time or have become a new requirement. And I have to then spend a bit of time ringing around manufacturers or trying to find pre-written NBS clauses from the manufacturers or content that's already in NBS.
Super, yeah. And so, as you say, on the left-hand side there, you've got your contents in there structured in that kind of consistent cause structure. And you tend to obviously reflect quite a large amount of those work sections for a typical project. So even though we're talking about small works, as you mentioned before, the same considerations need to be made, even if it's only a handful of clauses that you probably are using from those sections.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I mean, this is the office standard, so there's usually some that I would remove.
Depending on the project needs.
Yes, for example, here we've got the section for brick or block walling and one for natural stone rubble walling. It would tend to be on a project I would have one or the other. So when I import the office standards into a new project, I would just delete wholesale one of these whole sections that's not relevant.
And one of the things that you mentioned, sorry,
yeah,
go on, Peter.
I was just going to say, here's one that I've got in that often gets removed. So lead sheet roof covering. There aren't too many projects that I use that on, but some of the church work and things like that might have a lead roof. So usually that one gets deleted. So I try and get rid of anything that's not totally relevant to the project.
When it comes to exporting and publishing the document, is that something that you tend to do in a standard way? And do you use kind of the defaults within NBS Chorus?
Yes, I do. So let's show you the actual output then from
that would be wonderful.
From this one. It tends to be, I will have yeah, so this is it. It's just entirely standard. The only thing I do is change the name of the specification to include my my drawing reference sort of structure, so that when it's printed out, it includes the project name and my reference.
Yeah, internal.
So in fact, you can see there that that's version A that went out to tender, and this is now revision B. And I just do it informally by changing the letter in the name. And I keep a record by keeping the PDF versions that were issued. So I have a issue drawing structure which is dated, and then a copy of each PDF that was sent out. So I don't keep the master copy of the first one, because that PDF document is a definitive issue, and it will never be changed. So it's only the most current version I keep as the editable form. I will tend to issue one version which is A for pricing, so at tender, and then usually one or two other revisions. Often as soon as the contract's let, there'll be the whole swathe of changes on an architect's instruction, and there'll be a version B of the NBS spec that goes with that first AI. And then, yeah, that might happen once or twice more as a project progresses, if there's another AI that calls for a change of the specification.
Super. What I guess the final two questions are: what would you say are the main benefits of NBS Chorus for practices of a similar size? And then what are the improvements and things that you'd like to see in the future?
The main benefit really is just knowing that with this using an office standard and then drag it into a project, I just know that if someone needs to look, they can find out what kind of wall tie has been specified, what kind of block, without me having to go back and write that for every single project. Because human nature as it is, you can't be that comprehensive on every project. You'll always miss something. So by building up that office standard, it means all those things that might be forgotten get automatically drawn into every new project. So as time goes on, the information gets more and more complete. So I think that's the main benefit for me, is knowing that when it goes out for pricing, everything is specified. And although it's not necessarily read by the contractor, if there is ever any kind of dispute that comes up over pricing, I can say, look, this is what you were contracted to do. This is what's in the contract. You've substituted something, we need to adjust the price. You knew about it all the time. Because I often have contractors that claim ignorance and say, we weren't told it was supposed to be that. And I can say, well, yes, you were. There's the NBS spec. It's in black and white. You've got it on your hard drive. I think also as well, it's a design tool in that going through the specification on every project makes you actually pause for thought about every element of the construction. And it gives you a chance to think, oh, what's the fire protection like of that element, or do I need to revise this? So it's quite a good discipline going through the specification before it goes out to tender, and just picking up any of those little bits that need changing.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That was perfect. Yeah. And yeah, you can stop sharing your screen. Yeah. And then we're back to this. Perfect. Thank you so much again.
You're welcome.
And have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. If you're interested in hearing another case study, there's a great example of another small practice, J. Foster Architects. I'll just bring that up on screen, using NBS Chorus on their projects and how they've had success with integrating their work, using the plugins in particular. If you haven't seen that demonstration before, it's really worth watching. Just a short video and then an accompanying article from my colleague Stephen Hamill about how Jeremy Foster is using the platform in that way. And with that in mind, this is a quote from Jeremy, that although jobs in small practice might be smaller, there's a lot more risk as you're doing a lot more yourself. And so the true power of risk reduction is managing a project through the specification. And for small practice, it's even more crucial. It's a safety net, allowing you to deliver projects at a level of quality whilst protecting yourself. And that's certainly what we're hoping to do with NBS. You can contact NBS after this webinar, whether you're an existing customer or for more information if you're new to NBS. And feel free to put inquiries in the panel and our team will get in touch with you. A subscription to NBS Chorus for small works will be tailored to suit your working practices. And we offer a range of subscription options and content sets for different business types, along with flexible payments. So get in touch today and one of our team will be able to discuss the best subscription for your unique business. Alternatively, there's contact information on our website and through social media channels, and we look forward to speaking with you about your work. Equally, if you are an existing NBS Chorus customer and you'd like to tell us about how you use NBS and any feedback you want to share for future webinars and case studies, we'd love to hear from you about that. Thanks so much for your time today, and goodbye.